I don't have a chance to do a lot of hiring, but I would agree with everything that Camille and Stephen have just said. I think you need to be very much yourself, and yes, acknowledge nerves, acknowledge if you don't understand something, say, I'm sorry, could we discuss that a little bit more? Don't pretend and just nod your way through it. Try and learn something in the interview and try to share something of yourselves. When I was young and I was looking for this job, for a job, I was coming down to Washington, and I knew I wanted to work in this particular place. So I don't really recommend that you do this, but it worked for me. I drove up to this association, and I walked in the front door, and I said, "Hello, I would like to work here." And they said, well, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I live in Ohio, but I'm here now in Washington, and I would like to work here." And they didn't throw me out. They thought I was probably a little kooky, but they brought somebody out who sat down with me right then and there and interviewed me. And I was able to tell them why I wanted to work there, what my passion was for this particular place. And as I said, it was a risk, but I felt strongly enough that I just went ahead with it, and it worked out. It took a few months, but he called me back and he said, "I remember you. Are you still interested?" I said, "Yes, I am, and I'm still available," and we went through the hiring process. I had another occasion where I was declined. I applied for a job and I was not hired. And I felt so strongly that I should have been that I sort of went back and I said, "I'm sorry, why didn't you hire me?" And they said, "Well, because I was looking at your resume and I didn't see the word book on it." And I said, "Oh, well," and I asked for another chance to have a second interview. And I was granted that opportunity, and eventually I was hired for that job. So these are very bold moves, and as I said, it doesn't always work, and this was a long time ago as well. This was a different time. I know you're facing a lot of competition and all of that, but it goes to the point of being yourself. Follow. If you think this is the right place for you, do what you can to make that known and be as honest as you can about that.
Thank you. Well, as the rest of the panelists have said, I think it's almost a given that the technical skills or whatever the skill side is, it's something that we expect as an interviewer to go. And I haven't personally participated as the interviewee, but as coming from the same position that you're going to be in, in the coming months and years, knowing the skills isn't going to do it, because there are 20 other candidates who have the same skill set as you, possibly. But it's, again, getting a connection with the interviewer. So, and from a federal perspective, it's even more difficult because resumes are fairly strictly, and hopefully that'll change sometime soon, but the way that USA Jobs, the system, and the systems that a number of federal agencies use, they're very sort of keyword intensive. They're screened out by computers, so a lot of it is looking at the description of the position and determining, okay, what have I done? How does this relate to this somewhat highly bureaucratic language? So, as a student, saying you're writing a paper on saying it's analyzed and researched these things using X sources, finding ways to turn your academic and extracurricular activities into something that fits into that language. And a lot of that's just getting into the door. Beyond that, it's really, you just have to be able to make that connection. So humanize yourself. Often, humor is good. A lot of the panelist interviews that you go into in the federal government, they're spending a week just talking to 50 different people coming in, and they want to be able to see if you're someone that they want to be able to work with. So there are some differences within the federal sector, but again, bureaucrats are human too. So.
And I'm going to add a piece of advice that I'm assuming everyone's going to agree with and hoping everyone will agree with, which is use your career services office.
Yes.
You have a career services office that you should take advantage of. And some of the things that I work on with people, students and alums, so like I said, after you graduate, it works too. We go through resumes in great detail to make sure that there's information in there that somebody who is the target of the resume will be interested in reading about. And not everything that you do or have done is going to be interesting to the target audience. So there's a little bit of marketing going on here. Who's my audience? What do they care about? What do they need to know that I can do? And how can I explain that to them? And a resume and a cover letter aren't the easiest media to use, but you got to use them at least for now. So we go over those in great detail, and cover letters we go over in more detail. My policy is I won't review a cover letter unless there's a job that the cover letter is going to, because there's no such thing as a standard cover letter. If you have a standard cover letter, you should toss it, because it needs to be so specifically tailored to a position that if I got it by mistake, I'd look and say, this has nothing to do with me. And a lot of the letters that I get, if I got it by mistake and I wasn't the intended recipient, I think the name was wrong. But yeah, okay, that sort of applies to me. I mean, yeah, it could apply to kind of anybody. So if you can sub out the name of the organization and the letter still works, you didn't have a good letter. It's not going to tell them anything. So we do a lot of work on cover letters. And we don't do nearly enough work with people on interviewing. And interviewing is where I hear, in general, most of the concern from employers. Sometimes resumes look really good, and actually this particular program, cover letters often look terrific. This is a group that writes well, I can communicate information and ideas. So a lot of times my cover letters are just kind of tweaking and talking, and not so much, oh boy, what are we going to do with this, which does happen in some other instances. But interviewing seems to be, okay, great, you got in the door, but often the deal falls apart at that point. So we have a couple of resources. One of them is coming in and talking with me. But another one that not nearly enough people have taken advantage of is we have access to an online interviewing practice site called InterviewStream, where a person who has been, this is an actress, this is not a person who's actually looking at you on the computer in live time. I didn't explain that well to somebody once, and the person panicked. They thought somebody was actually on the other end watching. They're not. But there's an actress who's recorded asking, she must have asked, I'm sure she's recorded 3,000 or 4,000 questions. I have taken those questions and made question sets that are relevant to our students out of this huge database of questions. So you'll go on and she will ask you a question, and you'll have, I think I have it set for a couple of minutes, to reply to the question. And it's videoed, so you have to have a camera and an internet connection. Again, it's not live, so there's nobody on the other end. But at the end of recording that interview, you can ask for an assessment. I'll get a notice that you've done it, and I can give you some feedback on it. Not only can you do that, but you can send the link to the interview, or the mock interview, to anyone you want. So you can send to your parent, to your sibling, to your, I mean, anybody. I sent mine to my kids, but they were mean, so I'm never doing that. But you can send a link to anyone, and they can give you feedback as well. So if you had an informational interview with somebody, and that person, and you really hit it off, and they're not hiring, but they're just kind of serving as a little bit of a mentor for you, you can send them that, and you can say, hey, I'd love to hear what you think. You know, I worked hard practicing on this, but I may not have hit the mark, and I'd love to hear what you think. And the question that I can kind of tell who sort of got it and who sort of doesn't, and I don't know if you all have asked this question, is tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself is a good test, because a lot of times it's a terrible answer that starts with your high school and ends with the last job you had and hits everything in between, and the person's fallen asleep while you're talking about it. And so using the mock interview tool to even get that question down so that you feel comfortable with it is great. You can see yourself. And if you don't like the way you did, and I guarantee you you're going to hate the way you look or sound, my voice and my appearance freaked me out, so I had to steel myself through it. But you can watch yourself do it, and you can re-record the question. You can say, okay, I get a better idea. I didn't know that I did this. I apparently do this, because I'm seeing myself do it. I didn't know I did this. So let's try it again with not doing that quite so much. It's an amazing tool, and you can access it through the GWork CPS career management site that we use for scheduling appointments, that GW uses for job postings. If you don't have that login information for GWork CPS, which is where all the career stuff is going on for your program and for all of the university, you can go to the CPS website, and I have a link to it in there. Or you can just shoot me an email and say, Melissa, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know how to get in there. And I will send you login information and the web address, and you can go in there. And for those of you who don't, I'll write it on the board, but my email address is M as in Melissa. Feuer, strangely, is spelled F as in Frank, E-U-E-R. A lot of people won't call me because they're afraid they're going to get that wrong, but I don't care. I'm used to it. So it's mfeuer@gwu.edu. And if you shoot me a message, I'll give you login information. You can go in there. There's some sample documents that you can take a look at as well, kind of give you the tone and the feel for things. And most importantly, the connection to the mock interviewing tool. I would imagine that you would all agree Career Services is a good resource for you. You might as well take advantage of it.